Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good evening, Amy, Caroline, and Megan. Welcome to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects, titled Supporting Improved Math Achievements Through a Focus on Wellness with Marie-K Gondi. As I explained, we have a very small group tonight for a number of reasons. The weather being one of them, but we have the three of you in the class tonight, and we are very happy to have you with us. And as Marie-K indicated, it's a presentation that is based on dialogue, on exchange. So feel free to jump in at any time. You can obviously type in the chat box, or you could even pick up your microphone if you want to talk to Marie-K directly. So Marie-K has over 20 years of hands-on experience teaching kindergarten, intermediate levels, as well as teaching all the way to university level. She's a professor at York University. She also spent 4 years as the curriculum leader with the math portfolio for a school board. She's currently working as a teacher librarian and has facilitated many OTF Connects webinars and OTF Summer Institutes in the past. She's one of our most knowledgeable facilitators, and it's always a pleasure to have her with us. And so at this point, I'm going to invite Marie-K to jump in and to go ahead with the presentation. So remember to click on your talk button, Marie-K, and then you can go ahead. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks, Michelle. And could I just get a thumbs up that the sound is okay for you? My headset mic has just been making some funny noises in my ear. So I want to make sure that my voice is okay. I see a thumbs up from Amy and Megan, so I'm assuming we're good. I know that Caroline teaches grade 1. Amy and Megan, what grades are you working with most often? If you could put that in the chat room, and then I can make sure that my examples, secondary math, okay. Is this Amy? Do I know you, Amy? From a math a while ago? Okay, nice to see you again. And Megan, we'll just wait on that grade level. So we've got grade 1 right up to secondary. So I guess I'm going to, oh, nice, nice, awesome. All right. Oh, thanks, Michelle, for advancing the slides. So this is just talking about wellness, which is a big ministry initiative right now, and math, which is still another big ministry initiative. And kind of I've been thinking a lot about them together. I like to work hard, but I like to work on one thing at a time. So when I can put these two initiatives together, it makes my brain a lot happier. So this is right from the ministry's wellness initiative, the well-being strategy, I guess is what it's called. And I think that Michelle will share all these links as they come through the chat room, so don't need to grab them. There we go. This whole notion of well-being being the combination of self and spirit, and then there are 4 domains for it: cognitive, emotional, social, and physical. And it's the last line here that it's our job to work collectively to make sure that our children feel this way all the time. So it's well-being is not being happy, and it's not having everything your own way, but it's that sense of self and spirit. And we as teachers don't just work on it in health and phys ed. I mean, there are well-being expectations in that subject area, but even though it doesn't say it in our expectations, it's our responsibility as math teachers to address that. And then, if we don't have well-being, nothing else we do matters. There's going to be no long-lasting academic achievement if the student has not got that sense of well-being. Maybe not no, I guess that's overstated, but it won't be close to their potential. And I think that's a fair statement. This is the image that the ministry has created, or somebody has created for them, to just symbolize what well-being is. And again, it's very tied to our Indigenous communities and their heritage and history. So I like that we've tapped into that great knowledge on self and spirit and gone forward from there. And I think this link might come up again. So this is discussion document on the well-being strategy. A couple other things I want to draw your attention to because they might be new to you. The Minister Student Advisory Council meets with every year, and this is a group of, I believe it's 60 students from across the province, both from the Catholic Board and the Public Board, and they meet every year with the Minister of Education, the Deputy Minister of Education, and the Premier of the province. And during these meetings, somebody does a sketch note or a poster such as this. And Michelle, I know this is hard to see on the webinar slide, but Michelle has put links so that you can see these Speak Up posters in larger form. But I spent quite a bit of time recently just going over this one about the change. And remember, this is student voice. This is what students want education to be like. And thumbs up if you've seen these before, or if this is new to you, because I don't think it matters. I'm sure that the people on or from grade 7 and higher, but really it is, relevant to every age, I would think, if they could put it into words. So this is the most recent one about being the change in education. But then there's this one about mathematics and me. And again, the link to the larger form, if you want to check that out, will be in the chat room. But things when I looked over this, I noticed that the students want challenging problems in math, but they want access to support. And they want us, they're calling on us to help them develop a growth mindset. And they want to solve problems. And they recognize that math is everywhere, and it's a key to their success in the labor market and moving forward as successful adults. Even in cooking, it says. So the students are telling us that they recognize how important math is. And so as a math teacher, you may want to go through this and just pick out all the little details. You catch the big ideas quickly, but when you really look at all the little bubbles, you see what students are saying. And then they've done one for well-being. So each summer they focus on a different aspect, and they've also done one on well-being. And here they talk about their obstacles. What are the obstacles to their well-being? And they say outdating teaching methods, outdated technology, and the lack of differentiation or the need for them to have a differentiated education. And they need us to provide that. So as teachers, we've kind of got our bosses, the ministry, telling us we need to focus on well-being across all aspects of our teaching. And then our clients, or the students, are also telling us, look, we want math, but we need well-being as well. And so we're kind of getting this message from both sides, that this is something that we need to direct our attention to. So a kind of jigged image is they have kept in the center that kind of visual on what well-being is, but in the math context, they've put these puzzle pieces around. And so this is well-being in a mathematics classroom. And so this is the goal. For me, this is kind of what I go back to and check that my practice I'm teaching grade 8 this year, in my grade 8 math is hitting these puzzle pieces and acknowledging that center core of those 4 domains of well-being, always going back to self and spirit. Any comments about that so far? Or, as I said, I'm going to keep talking quickly probably, and then we can have specific questions at the end. So let's see. Oh, I see a thumbs up from Amy, and I'll just wait. This is okay, awesome. So are there any questions about it then, Caroline, or any comments about? I actually have this up on my board for my students to see too, because I think that's important for them. Okay, awesome. Well, if you want to come back to this at the end then, Caroline, if something percolates and you've got another question, I'm happy to revisit this later. So this is the ideal. This is what we're supposed to be striving towards. Amy, I don't know about the publications, and I'm not sure that the ministry is putting out anything anymore, other than when it's brand new. I think we're kind of left to do our own web printing, but I'm not positive about that. So before was the ideal, and maybe this is reality. There's a difference between what we want and what we have. And I think we're moving away from this as being kind of typical of most math classes. But like I just attended a professional development session on behavior, and every time the presenter in the session talked about students wanting to avoid something, so a student would bring on a behavior so they could avoid something, what they wanted to avoid was math class. Every single time the presenter kind of had to slam some part of school, it was always a math class. And then if you watch media, you know, if there's a classroom situation or they talk about going to math class, usually the characters give a groan, and the math teachers are the evil ones who, you know, drill and stand up and smack the board with the rulers. And if there's a detention, it's usually a math worksheet. And, you know, so this is a long way away from that image of well-being and mathematics being combined. And there's also the adult anxiety piece around math. And sometime in my reading for this, preparing for this session tonight, I read, and I couldn't find the breadcrumbs, but I'll try and find the source of this stat. 55% of adults, North American adults, and I guess probably just Canadian and American adults, admit to not being able to calculate a 10% tip at a restaurant. So just a 10% tip sent them into an anxious state, and they felt was beyond their capability. And this is actually interesting because I also read, or maybe it was one of the CBC documentaries about those little credit card machines that they bring. People just naturally go and press the button, I want 15%, or I want to add 20% or 10%, whatever the percent is. And actually what they were finding is that they're calculating it wrong. So if you don't know what the percent of the tip should be close to, you're probably getting fleeced. And also those machines calculate the tip, including all the taxes and everything else that you might want not to be tipping on. But just to avoid actually having to do that math, people will just take that risk and press those buttons. So we are still in a math-anxious society for students. For politicians, every time these results come out, I think every spring or fall when they come out, and then for adults as well. But this anxiety that pervades society, it's not genetic. Contrary what the parent who comes into a parent-teacher interview and says, well, I was never good at math, so of course Johnny or Susie, they aren't going to be good at math. There's no science to suggest that there's anything genetic about math skills or math anxiety. And yet the anxiety does pass from parent to student. And there's an article, and the link will come up, about this and why, you know, what parents say at home or feel about math very quickly transfers to their children. And here's the thing too, it's not just what the parents feel about math, it's also about what the teachers feel about math. And this article tells you that the greatest percentage of math anxious teachers are elementary teachers. And it's a crazy stat, and they tell stories about how students come into a classroom with math anxiety, and maybe they've never had math anxiety before, but by the end of spending a year with that teacher who is math anxious, the students have picked up math anxiety, and then the achievement starts to fall. I believe it is nurture, not nature, in this case, Amy. Caroline, can you, I know you're typing, but what do you mean about eye-opening? Yes, and hi, Margaret, welcome. This is a very small, intimate, grab the mic and talk kind of webinar. I see Caroline's typing, so I'm going to wait. Oh, no kidding, Caroline. Primary math, all that subitization and unifying and all that stuff, huge concepts. It's not just 3 + 2 = 5. There's so much background into knowing primary math. Absolutely. Okay, going on. The thing is, students, young children, actually love math. And there's a man by the name of Douglas Clements, and he works out of, I think, University of Buffalo. And I believe there's going to be a link coming up to an article that he wrote and shared. He co-wrote with a woman, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name right now. But here's what he studied. He took 90 early learning students, so maybe 4- and 5-year-olds, and he observed them for 15 minutes of their play. So they are just supposed to be playing. And he started to codify and quantify their actions. And what he found, that only 12% of the students, so I guess what would that be, 10 of the 90 students roughly, had no math in their play, which then means that 80 of those students, when they were just doing free play, there was an aspect of math in their play. And of the 15 minutes, almost 50% of the time was on a very specific and obvious math concept, like measuring or adding or patterning or regrouping or something like that. So these kids naturally want to do math. And if you've ever talked to a young child or your own child, they want to count to 100 for you as soon as they can do that. And they want to do it many, many times, at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, you know, on the car ride, to the grocery store, from the grocery store. They are so proud of their math skills. And so what happens then? Because this is not what adults feel about math, and this is not what lots of my grade 8s feel about math. And so something happens between their very early learning years and becoming the adult that doesn't feel comfortable to calculate 10%. And unfortunately, a little bit of guilt, but it might be what happens in school. And so as teachers, we need to make sure that what we are doing works against developing that math anxiety and works towards building that math well-being, that 4-domain center with those 5 mathematical skill or math processes, puzzle pieces around it. So I don't have it all figured out, but I'm happy to share my thoughts. And here's the first thought, is we leave this whole aspect of play far too soon. And so my thing, and it's not my wording, but I think it's called, a good memory is the greatest impediment to change in education. Or, you know, we have, as teachers, we have a strong sense of tradition, and we find it very hard to change practice. And I think we really, really need to. If early learners love math, what happens? And we need to think about it very carefully. In the grade 1 curriculum, I just double-checked this today, the only thing that children need a pencil for is there is one expectation, and it's not even an overall expectation, it's part of the first overall expectations, but the specific expectation says that students need to read and print in words, not even in number form, in words, whole numbers up to 10. And I went through the entire grade 1 math curriculum from number sense, every single strand, and that's the only expectation that required a pencil or some kind of writing utensil. Everything else could be done without pencil. And I think if those teachers started that way, then I'm hoping it even oozes into grade 2. And when they have a really strong foundation in these number sense, then we introduce the pencils. And then we introduce these communication skills. Then I thought about other things like triangulation of data from other researchers. Well, we could have conversations, observations, and products in classrooms that don't involve pencil. And so I really think that we need to respect what young children are, and my grade 8s would rather tell me about it than write it down. So as a grade 8 teacher, I'm trying hard to really think about, why am I having my students record this on paper? Is this part that I need to do? And yes, my grade 8s do need to know how to communicate their math thinking. They need to know the conventions of how to record it on paper, but not always. And maybe if I did less on paper, they'd get a deeper understanding, so what they wrote on paper would be even more precise and more mathematical, and all their proofs would be just so. I'm going back to read the comments. I do believe, well, even I think about number talks, and if you're familiar with those books, Sherry Parrish and all those number talks, I think the engagement of my students when they are just doing their mental math and they're not using a pencil, I really think that is part of the problem. Amy, you really do start with manipulatives or puzzles even in secondary? I think that makes you quite unique, and I'm really happy to see that. Awesome. Right, Caroline, if it doesn't have pencil and paper, it's not math. And this is a point that I wanted to make, and I don't think I put a slide in. When we do this shift, we need to talk to parents about it first. Or maybe not first, but not definitely just at report card time. We need to let them know what we're changing and why we're changing it. Because there's no reason for us to have, it doesn't say in the curriculum that we need it. Really, that one expectation of the 50 that are in the grade 1 math curriculum, 1 required a pencil. Awesome. I love that number talks are catching on. So this is my thing, play. Play, 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 play. I remember a grade 4 class, I pretended I was setting up an ice cream store, and I walked in a suit and with a briefcase. And so play doesn't look like the cash register that it might in kindergarten and grade 1 and maybe even grade 2. But play could be pretending to be adult. Play could be setting up a business. My grade 8s right now, they're running businesses where they're making crafts to sell, to offset or to collect spending money for their Quebec trip. And this is really engaging for them. And they're doing their balance sheets and their ledgers and they're costing everything. And they're figuring out the best place to buy. And so all their rate work is in the context, or their summative work for all their proportional reasoning. A lot of it is coming out of this, we call it the manufacturing fair. But it's a sense of play for these kids. It doesn't always look like this image. And I think that's really key to work towards that mathematical well-being of our students. Next is this whole idea, this is how math is traditionally seen. It's black and white, it's right or wrong. Students maybe do 15 questions and we count up how many they got right. And that, if you did that, most parents probably would not balk at that. That is what they expect, that is what they experience, so tends to be how math success was viewed. And again, it's perpetuated by our grading practices. But when you look through growing success, we're not supposed to grade this way. There's nothing in the current policy that tells us we count the number of wrong answers and we subtract it from the number of right answers and we give a grade. And there's all kinds of research that shows us or suggests to us that when we do give a grade, it stops the learning. It perpetuates this fixed mindset. And so thumbs up if you're familiar with Dweck's work on growth mindset, because I can talk about it for a minute. If I see one thumbs up, this whole Carol Dweck and her growth mindset versus fixed mindset. You see this? Awesome. Okay. Then I'm going to assume that's a good from everybody. And so I think as we shift away from just the performance part of doing the math through the processes and the strategies rather than answers, and we want students to generalize, and that's what we assess, that we will start to break down this anxiety. Because if you get a lot of wrong answers, you might view yourself as a weak math student, and that might make you anxious. The funny thing is that a lot of students who get wrong answers might be actually doing more mathematical reasoning than some of your students who get all right answers. They're not reasoning at all. They just understand the procedure, and they are quite happy to repeat that procedure, possibly without any mathematical reasoning at all, and get the good number from you. My grade book right now just looks like a series of check marks. Across the top, I've got the expectations, and then I've got a little code. So if I put a check mark in the box under that expectation, that to me is a 75%. Tells me that I've seen on that instance that student demonstrated grade level work for that expectation. And then a check minus is they were kind of in the grade level range, but there's a little bit of improvement to do. And a check plus is a 78. And then two checks is a 92, and two checks and a plus, or no, sorry, two checks is an 82 and then 88. And those are really the only marks I give out in math, because in grade 8 I have to give them a percent, but I still have to fit it into the descriptors of the levels. And then anything in the 60s is an X, and then a low C is an X minus because they haven't met grade level expectations. So the X doesn't mean wrong, it just means haven't quite met the grade level expectations. So a shift away from the right, wrong, counting of answers, I think is really going to help with wellness, because students will see themselves differently, and it will feed into the whole growth mindset. So here's kind of an example, not from my grade 8 class. This is from a grade 4 class, I believe, a few years ago. So take a second, grab a pencil if you want. I know not grade 1, and definitely not high school math, but here's a problem. And don't worry about the context. I gave it to the students in the context of a problem. Maybe it was the dimensions of a rectangle and they had to find the area, or maybe it was something that was happening in February with 28 days. I can't remember, but this was definitely the calculation. So I'm going to sip on tea, like really, 20 seconds, work through this calculation on your own. And there is a reason to work through it. I guess you could thumbs up when you're done. I've seen 3 thumbs. Not sure about Amy. She may be away. And Caroline, I went back and read in your chat the comment about grade 1s thinking the answer was what it is, and this need to be right and wrong. I love that you give them the answer first and ask them why it makes sense. Or maybe give them wrong answers and ask them, does it make sense, and see what they come up with. Because that definitely is a way to tackle the whole right and wrong focus. So I gave this question, and awesome, both. Sorry, distracted. This is my printing, but this is me transcribing what a student did. So when you look at this, what would your feedback be to this grade 4 student who had done this work? And it is the right answer. 1,288 is the correct calculation. So when a student does this, what do you say to the student? Grab the mic if you want, if it's easier. Awesome. Is there another way to be more efficient? And I will say I'm a little cautious of that word efficiency. I know it's in our achievement chart, but efficiency to me means I can start at the beginning and I can get all the way through the end without needing to backtrack. And so maybe this is efficient for this student, maybe not. So I am a little bit worried about efficient. I know before, if a student did this, I would put them right to the algorithm. I say, yeah, this is great. You know, this addition is great, but let's look at how we could multiply to get this answer. When now I understand that this strategy is a form of multiplying. It's counting groups of 46, which is exactly what multiplying is. It's just, you know, a different way. So here is what I say, because this whole, when I teach through problem solving, I wouldn't have done a unit on multiplying before I gave this problem to students. So they were coming at it cold. So I want to see their student-generated solutions or student-generated algorithms. But as the teacher, my responsibility is still to move them forward mathematically. So here is what I say to the student, and I would show them this. Maybe make sense of this just for a second. So I see Caroline's typing, but I'm going to talk anyway, and we'll go back to what she adds to the conversation. I know this student can add, but I know that this student doesn't need to add 28 groups of 46. Finding out what 10 groups is and helping them understand that 10 groups of 46 is 460, I've just shortened down, because if, and this student did have a strong sense of place value, they could find, well, 10 groups is that, and another 10 groups is another 460, and then I still have 8 more groups of 46 that I have to account for. So I talked to this student and said, would you consider trying this strategy? And then we talked about why they might want to shift from the strategy on the left to the strategy on the right. Time. Fewer opportunities to make a mistake and get lost in how many you've counted and how many you've included. So the student was totally okay with this. Then I showed them this third strategy on the far right. Look how close 28 is to 30 groups of 46. And maybe if we figured out what 30 groups of 46 was, and then just subtracted those extra 2 groups, then we could get the answer very quickly. So when the student did the work on the left, that's an example of student voice. They were telling me what they knew about this multiplication question. And I think before, a lot of times, I was not very respectful, I'll use that word, of student voice. I knew what I wanted students to do, and when they didn't do it, I just showed them again what I wanted them to do. In the last couple of years, I've been much more aware of student voice, and I believe that students do their best work every chance. They have a chance to show you something, I believe it's their best work. So if I respect that, but still see them as being competent and capable to improve, I want to make sure that the feedback I give them is really their next step. It's not the big jump from where they are to the end of how I might solve it. It's their next step. Because you can see from the one on the left, a progression to the middle. Then if another problem came up, I might direct them to this whole notion of going ahead and then readjusting. Or then, are you familiar with this? Because this is a matrix. It's not the lattice. It's just a way. It definitely respects place value, because a lot of times when students do the traditional algorithm, they lose track of place value. They put zeros in as placeholders and X's and bring things down, but they're not really thinking about why they're bringing it down or why they're putting a placeholder in. So this strategy of multiplication really respects place value and helps to develop a student sense of that. And then when I go to the traditional algorithm, I can help students see the connection between. And really, when we go back and look at those long lists of numbers added, we can even find evidence of those in these two strategies. So this whole, I see Amy hasn't thought of that as student voice before. I think of everything the students create for me as them sending me a message. I just have to slow down and figure it out. And then as I read Growing Success, and I was really, I got to spend some time last year focusing on descriptive feedback and really what the next steps were. And I never really paid attention to the word next. I thought of it before my report card comments and everything was always what they needed to do to make it look like I wanted. And now I'm really slowing down for them. Over the course of the year, they'll probably get there to where I'm hoping they are, but I'm really trying to take them developmentally through. And I know Kathy Fosno's got those landscapes of learning and kind of develops the concepts step by step by step. And some of the gap closing materials from Marion Small also do the same. Well, if a student's not understanding this, like adding fractions, maybe it's because they can't picture what a fraction of a set is versus, so it's not really the adding, it's the fraction of a set that's problematic for the student. So that's kind of something that I've been really trying, because then what I'm seeing is students don't give me blanks anymore. They trust me that they'll give it a try, and they trust that I will help them make it a little bit better every time. There's not going to be a push to fix everything all in one shot. And I think that's important for students. And so here is just my reminder, really give them the next step, not the final step. And on this slide, I think, yeah, Amy, I think we all want to jump ahead because we feel very pressured by this curriculum with all the expectations and everything else. So I think slowing down is always a good thing. I think this is a resource from TVO. It's just a one-pager on descriptive feedback. I don't know if this is something that's part of your practice or maybe something that's just starting into your practice or maybe something that's not there and you'd like to. So I just thought I'd share that. It's a one-pager if you have seen it. And then the other part about descriptive feedback is they have to use the feedback. So you have to make sure giving them feedback is meaningless if they don't have the time or you don't expect them to act on it. And again, Michelle just put in the chat descriptive feedback from the EduGains. So that whole assessment for learning resource from EduGains is put in the chat there for you. Going back to this notion of expecting students to act on your feedback. These are two little techniques that I've used, and I'm sorry I can't tell you where they're from. They've been part of my practice for a couple years now, but they're not mine. I will tell you they're not mine. I can't tell you whose idea they are. I used to do this, but now I do this. So whatever the work is, and I just grab this, I usually make up my own, so I personalize it or make it very task specific. I used to do this, but now I do this. Or I used to, whether it's an action or a thought or a strategy, and I just make them write it down. I usually, sometimes I just do it digitally and then they just share it in their Google folder. So I have a collection of their tabs like this so that I can see their self-assessment and how they've acted on the feedback that I've given them. The other one here is a please consider. So if I would have told that student to try looking for groups of 10 that he could work from, and my very first step after he did that long list of 28 numbers to add, that student, after our conference, the next time he was tackling multiplication, he might do the groups of 10, and then he would write a little please consider. Please consider that I followed, or I tried the new strategy of groups of 10, or however we described it. And so that's just evidence reminding me that that was feedback he had and he's acting on it, and also reminding him on the importance of the feedback. So I'm not spending time conferencing or writing feedback and then it go nowhere. So these are just two of my very simple accountability pieces that I use with my descriptive feedback. Do any of you have anything similar that you do that you could share or type or grab the mic and talk about? I'm not seeing anything there. Would you do this? Thumbs up if you think you might try something like this. I will say it's been a huge game. Like it really does impact student performance. Okay, so I thought about the kinds of tasks I give students, all with the intention of preserving their well-being, their mathematical well-being specifically, but well-being in general. So I've considered the tasks, I've considered my descriptive feedback and how I'm moving students forward. The next thing that I question, sorry, I always hit my key on the computer to advance a slide. It doesn't work. I also wonder about why do we have students all complete the same task? And I think I know why, but I often think, does everybody need this task? And what about homework? Does everybody need to complete the same homework, the same project, the same number of questions on a sheet? And one of the things I find with wellness is students get really frustrated by busy work. And they recognize busy work early on. Primary students know if it's really meaningful or if it's just busy work. And I want to get rid of busy work. I don't want students doing school stuff when it's not helping them learn or helping their fluency. So if they need practice, then I want to make sure they have practice. But if they don't need this practice anymore, I don't want to waste a child's time. My homework for my grade 8s tonight was to be outside until their parents would no longer let them be outside. That's way more important tonight than anything else. So think about this in terms of differentiation. We need to make sure that our math programs are differentiated for the students in front of us. But then, in the sake of teacher wellness, there is no way we can plan and deliver 25 personalized math programs or however many students you have in your class. And so differentiation is the goal. Individualized programming is the goal. There are ways to do it. And here are one of mine. Oh yeah, teacher wellness is huge for me. My big thing is if you put something else on my plate, what are you taking off my plate? I'm old enough now that I'm selfish and I work hard, but I don't want to burn myself out. I need to be a whole person. My family doesn't need me to be blubbering on the sofa or locked up in my office every night. They need to see me too. So I definitely focus on teacher wellness. So this is a typical thing in my classroom. I take out the number and the students can fill it in. So if you were a grade 6 student, what do you think you would fill in that blank with before you solve the problem? I see in the chat, Amy's asked about student anxiety with these open questions. So sometimes I leave it blank. Sometimes I put 3 choices. So for this one, maybe I would put, let's see which ones I wrote down, $5.95, $4, $2.50, and then an other. So if they can't come up with a number on their own, I give them choices, but I still put that other if somebody has an idea that they want. So some of my colleagues, well, first of all, this is a great assessment tool. If I have my grade 6 students only putting in whole dollar amounts, never always avoiding the $5.95 or something like that, or picking $5, it tells me about what they want to avoid. And probably they want to avoid it because they're not comfortable with those skills. And so if they're not comfortable with those skills, that tells me I need to practice those skills more often. So this is actually a great planning tool for me. It tells me what I need to focus some more on for certain students and what is not a problem anymore for students. The other thing too is, so let's say a student puts $5 in there. What do I know that they understand? If they solve it properly because they've used $5, I still know that they get what a unit rate is. I know that they don't want to do a lot of division, but I know that they understand how to calculate it, and then that's really easy coaching for me. I can start with a positive. Look, I see that you understand how to do this. You take the amount of money and you divide it by the number of batteries. And I would ask them, so why did you choose $5? Well, because that's easy, 5 divided by 5. I know what one battery would cost. And I'd say, great, how can we work? What would we do if it was $2.50? Well, that would be half as much. Great. And then I kind of work them through the other options in small group coaching so they understand that you actually do know how to do this question. You maybe just were a little bit scared because of the decimals. So I do agree, Amy, that sometimes too open is too daunting, but open with some choices and some parameters, kind of a safety net, I find really good. It's differentiated. Every student can work at the math that they want. And this is maybe, you know, a simple example, but I do it with other calculations. Or I might say it's 2-digit number multiplied by a 2-digit number. I can see which students stay in the 10 range and which go into like 63 times 94 or something like that. Definitely helps me to see where they're at. So still gives me an insight into their understanding of the expectation. Gives me assessment or planning data on what I need to focus on. And I really do believe that students do max out. They try to do their best work most of the time. And there'll be the odd kid who always picks the easy route. I think that's, in my experience, it's been very quickly fixed by a conversation with that student in terms of, yeah, you can make this choice, but you realize the assessment implications down the road. Or, you know, when you don't have the choice and you're doing your taxes and you can't just keep it to whole numbers, you know, you won't be ready. Amy, I know it's going to be typing if you don't grab a mic, but what makes something their favorite question? That's what I wonder. What's the difference between your favorites and their favorite question? Ah, okay. So the blank is one. Have any of you done incredible equations before in your class? Thumbs up if you've done them and you know this strategy. Okay, I see a no. Okay, so an incredible equation is as simple as this. You pick a number, and students write as many equations as they can to meet that target number. I did this exact one with my grade 8s yesterday. So powerful. Because, and I did it with when I taught kindergarten 2 years ago now. I used to do it because I put up 8 and they would tell me, and a lot of it was through pictures or they'd make models. So my kindergarten class wasn't always writing on paper, but for some it was. And then one day, I think the number would have been, the target number was 6. And somebody put up, well, first of all, the big thing was a 3 and a 2 and a 1, because we'd had the 5 and the 1 and the 4 and the 2, and then somebody put up 3, 2, and 1 to get to 6. And that was just like a big, whoa, in kindergarten. You can use more than 2 numbers to add, and that was just, so then I got every possibility, and then I got 4, and then I would say, can you use 8 numbers to get to 6? And then they were like, no, and I said, well, no, not yet, because eventually they'll get negative. So I didn't want to say no, not ever, but kind of thing. And then somebody put a 6 and a 0, and nothing was in the second. And so then that was another, whoa, you know, somebody's understanding what 0 is, and we would go and celebrate it. We've just been working on, in my grade 8 class, 6, so order of operations with 6 different operations in each equation, and they are responsible for only whole numbers, but then brackets and exponents and square roots, of course. So then the students who totally understand that were making these 6 operation equations that ended up at 25. Other students in my class were writing 5 times 5, you know, 5 times 6 minus 5. So they were keeping it very simple. It tells me exactly their comfort levels in number sense and numeration. So it's a really quick assessment data. For those of you in school too, we did a math night where we did incredible equations all with the same target number, and then we put them up in the halls. And then it was really neat for parents to just kind of walk the halls and see the progression from kindergarten to grade 8 number sense and calculations. And then it was neat for students to see too. When the grade 1 student recognized that they had the same equation on their page that maybe a grade 7 had, that was kind of a neat unifying experience. Nostalgic for the grade 8s to go back and look at some of the primary examples. So those are ways that I can differentiate. Everybody is working at their level. I'm getting rich assessment data from it, and I haven't spent my whole night planning 25 individual math programs. Here's another, this is from the ministry's capacity building series, and if you're not familiar with this series of monographs, the link that Michelle is going to put will get you to this specific monograph, but then you can also backtrack and find all the other capacity building monographs. Really good professional reading, and they're like 4 to 8 pages long, so it's not like buying a whole book, written in a voice that's quite easy to understand and really relevant to classroom practice. So the ways I've talked about are my attempts to be a responsive teacher, to greet the students and meet the students where they're at and move forward from there. As I said before, I'm not getting blank pages anymore. Students aren't quitting. They're more really willing to persevere. From my traditionally high-achieving students who were really struggling when I switched to teach through problem solving, they're more willing to take risks. They're less afraid of being wrong because they trust me that I will just give them the next step to get them closer to being right. So this whole approach, me prioritizing their wellness over getting the answer fast, has led to these gains in the performance of my students. So any comments about that? Seeing no typing, so I'm going on. This guy, this is Stuart Shanker. He's a big guy in self-regulation. And self-regulation, I think, is really key in terms of supporting students' ability to self-regulate and to manage stress and anxiety, and therefore learning to preserve their own wellness. Because as the teacher, I can do some things, but the student has to have tools to do as well. So I believe the first link there, it's a YouTube link, is a 5-minute video clip that I think it's worthwhile to take these 5 minutes and watch it now. If you've already seen it, go make tea or something else, but I think it's going to be helpful for everybody to watch it. So I'm going to turn my mic off, and if you watch this video, and I'm going to watch the clock, so in 5 minutes I'm going to start again because this is like 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you click that link in the chat, it should open up a new browser and play this video about self-regulation from Shanker. So I watched it and I'm done. Thumbs up or green check or something if I think the timer is going to go off anyway, so. Ah, great. I just realized the timer was there. Sorry, Michelle. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Shanker's work or not. And the interesting thing is he is talking about young children, but Michelle's already posted a link that talks about this need in secondary as well with older students. Self-regulation is something we still need to coach them on even when they get older through our modeling because their brains are still changing. So we do need to keep up with this focus on self-regulation. It looks like the temper tantrums and the crying and being hangry that was in that video, but you can probably recognize it, Amy, don't you think, in secondary as well, when a student is dysregulated or really struggling to self-regulate. They usually don't drop to the floor and stomp their feet, but, you know, we definitely see. So another link there was to more of Shanker's videos just like this that supports and that article. So I definitely talk about self-regulation. And to help my students self-regulate, there's some things that I do. I try and reduce some of the stressors and triggers, and then I also try and empower the students to self-regulate whenever possible. So the big trigger for anxiety that I get rid of is time. And I think back to my grade school experience, we did Mad Minutes every day. And some students, I was good at them. Therefore, I liked math. Games like Around the World, I was good at it, so I liked it. But all this time and the speed and apart is a big source of anxiety for a lot of students in my class. And there's no need for us to consider time at all. It's not in the curriculum. As we kind of talked about earlier, it's not necessarily connected to efficiency. It may play a role in efficiency, but it's not the end-all and be-all. Some teachers I hear, and I'm sure I've said this myself, well, I've got to prepare them for the real world where there are deadlines and, you know, sometimes you don't just have 40 minutes to do something. You have to get it done in 10. And I've come to realize and accept that school is the real world for these students, and my job is not to prepare them for the real world. My job is to teach the kids I have in front of me the curriculums that I need to teach, and I'm going to just trust that the people who are developing these curricula know what it's going to take to create successful adults. And so I am going to do my best to do what I can with the curriculum and not get all caught up in this, you know, well, school of hard knocks and they just have to do it. That was definitely a mindset when I started teaching 27 years ago. And so I'm glad to say that I've shifted away from it. So whenever possible, I'm very cognizant of if there's a time component, does it matter, and can I just eliminate it for so many of these students? And sometimes students just work. They owe me 30 minutes of math reasoning, whatever they get done. Some of the students will get done 4 tasks, others will get done 1 task. That's fine. They've all put in 30 minutes of math reasoning on a set of problems or challenges that I've presented to them. Done. So the next thing is I try and be the Goldilocks of math teachers. I try and, so remember Goldilocks, she goes through and one bowl is too hot and one bowl is too cold and one bowl is just right. So I am trying to find the tasks that are just right. And it's not as easy as it sounds, or maybe it doesn't sound easy to you, but if I pick tasks that are too hard, I know I'm going to trigger my students, their anxiety, and I'm going to make it more difficult for them to self-regulate. They'll be faced with excessive frustration, and they're not going to see themselves as a mathematician, or they'll have a diminished view of their own self-efficacy. They don't see themselves as being able to be successful, and they'll shut down and go through similar things that we saw in the video. The problem with too easy is it robs students of that chance for that productive struggle. And there's something about, I mean, we've all probably done it, right? You're faced with a challenge and you solve it. There's that feeling of yes, you know, and it's a real rush. And if everything is so easy that students never feel that rush, you know, that's not good for them either. So we want to make sure that we're looking for that sweet spot. And, you know, sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't, but I definitely, it's my goal. But I know I'm going to miss it, so please excuse. We all have, you know, those days where we just don't feel like we can do anything. And I tell my students at the beginning of the year that I understand that there are going to be days that maybe they had an argument with dad before they came to school, or maybe their pet isn't feeling so well and they're a little bit scared, or they've had a fight with a friend, or for me right now, my gosh, they're all in love with each other and maybe somebody's in love with somebody else. And they're humans. They have days. And sometimes performing in my math class is not possible for them to really engage in what's going on. And I have given my students permission to, if it's one of those days, please just come and talk to me and then manage themselves. So what manage themselves mean is they'll grab a beanbag and they'll just read a book. Or they'll sit and they'll work on some other homework that's not causing them that anxiety. I would rather do that than have them get in the habit of skipping. So when they think that they're having one of those days, they just start to skip classes for grade 8s. Not very many skipping grade 1s, but so I just let them opt out. I'd rather have them be in the class where they overhear the conversations that I'm having with the students who are participating in the challenge than have them be elsewhere. So I welcome them into our room, but I understand that they're not able to do it. And so I did this to my grade 8 class at the very beginning, maybe the second or third day of school, and I've had 4 students take advantage of it, each one time only. So I think people will say, well, everybody's going to opt out all the time. They don't. They don't want that. They do want to do school and they want to be successful, but respecting them as people and just knowing that, you know, I care about them, this goes a long way to build that culture. So this please excuse definitely helps remove one of the triggers or some of the triggers on certain days for certain students. The other thing I try and do is I'm explicit about my talk moves. So I teach through problem solving. So at the beginning of most of my lessons, there's a minds-on activity, and I expect students to participate in a turn and talk. And there's lots of research about the benefit of that, and I tell my students about the benefits of that. I don't really just want you to talk for the sake of talking. I'm asking you to talk because when you talk and when you listen, synapses fire and pathways are strengthened in your brain, and recall and retrieval is a lot easier. Telling students that means that they're actually going to be talking about the math, not about the hockey game last night or something else. I talk to them about why I make the problems problems and not just questions for them to quickly solve. I tell them my goal is to make a problem that it's going to take them almost 10 minutes to really feel like they've got a good strategy to see this problem through at the end. If they read the problem and know what to do immediately, I have failed. And I tell them that so that they don't get so upset when it does take 10 minutes. That's what I'm expecting, because that's what learning takes. It takes that productive struggle. And if that productive struggle isn't there, then it's just practice. And some days I'm aiming for practice, and some days I'm aiming for learning. So I really find that, and I used to tell my grade 1s and my kindergartens this too. I would tell them about turn and talks, and I would tell them about how talking helps you learn, and how moving manipulatives and building the blocks, and I mean, I wouldn't go into it all. I show TED Talks to my grade 8s. I show them Carol Dweck's TED Talks, and I've shown them some Joel Bowler clips about why I'm doing things the way I'm doing in class. I shouldn't be the only one in the room that is building an understanding of how successful learning occurs. So I'm trying to share that with them, and then they are able to deal with any frustrations that might arise. I'm not seeing typing, or I'm not seeing a lot going on. Amy's typing right now maybe, so I'm going to just keep moving with these strategies. Calm. I tell the students, when they are triggered, so the first couple were about how I try and remove the triggers for them in my class, but for sure, I'm going to trigger them. So I just see Amy's question here, so I'm going to pause and deal with Amy's question first. How many times do I tell them? Every time I think they need it, so quite often. I have posters in my class that say what I'm doing too. It's on our website. I send it home to parents quite often and redirect them. I do have a student who meets with our CYC because I have told them they know, but they're not internalizing my message, and so they're actually seeking help from our youth counselor about this to try and help. We can't fix everything, but I'm doing the best I can by being open. So going on to this, and I see Amy's got thumbs up, so assume she's okay with that. So calming strategies. I will trigger kids, or kids will be triggered, whether it's my fault or my, not fault, but I don't know a better word to use there. So in our school, we use zones of regulation. Are anybody familiar with that? The zones of regulation. I know it's pretty big. I see thumbs up from Megan there. She knows it. I can't even tell you who it's by. Amy says no. Caroline, yes. So zones of regulation, it's just a book about, they talk about green. So green is when you're calm and you're receptive to new ideas and you feel like you'd be able to collaborate with a friend. Yellow is you're anxious or maybe frustrated. Blue is when you're sad. And then red is you are angry and can't learn, and you're really dysregulated if you're in red. So in grade 8, I don't really talk about the colors, but I do give them a toolbox that they can use, and we talk about it. And we've talked about zones, but I said, I'm not going to call them the colors for you, but you're going to recognize how you're feeling. And so things that I've talked to students about are taking deep breaths, getting a drink of water, going for a walk around the school, putting in your earbuds and listening to a favorite song. And so these are just things that are kind of in everybody's toolbox in my class. If a student is going to the fountain to get a drink of water and coming back, they don't need my permission to leave the class. And usually they just make eye contact with me as they leave and they come back. No problem. Our school is in a big square, so sometimes they just go for a walk around the square outside our classroom, or sometimes they just get up, and I'm lucky enough to teach in our learning commons, so I have a large room. They'll just walk the perimeter and get a little bit of physical movement to help them get rid of a little bit of energy and maybe self-regulate. Put in earbuds, listen to a favorite song. Whatever they need to kind of counterbalance or counteract that trigger is okay. And some students have different, I have a boy that has a sensory and needs some putty in his hand, so that's fine. The deal is you can use it anytime you need to, but I don't find it on the carpet and in other places. So I think letting kids know what they can do in your classroom without always having to ask permission to do it is really important, to give them a toolbox that they can recognize when they're feeling anxious and they can do something about it independent of permission from you. So definitely do that. And then a while ago, I read a book called Lost at School by Ross Greene. And I know our secondary teachers did that book study a lot. So anybody familiar with this book? It's Lost at School by Ross Greene. I should have put the note here. But I read it a few years ago, and it changed my practice. I used to think that kids were manipulating me or just trying to get out of doing work. And basically what Ross Greene believes, and I think he's a behavioral scientist, he believes that, like I do now, students do their best, and when they are struggling to do something that you don't want them to do, it's because they have a lagging skill. And so before I used to punish, I would yell across the room, sit down, stop that, blah, 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 blah. And now I changed how I deal with behavior that I don't want to repeat in my class. I go up to them, and this is exactly what I say to them. It seems to me as though you are struggling to work collaboratively or use the manipulatives or, get started on this task. Whatever that behavior is, I fill in there. And then I say, is there anything I can do to help? And all of a sudden, the kid is caught off guard and kind of taken aback, and they're like, you know, they kind of pause and they think, no, I think I could do this. I think I can do this on my own. It's just a way to redirect them through offering help. I name the behavior that I'm not happy about, and then I just say, can I help? With no anger, a quiet voice, as close to them as I can get. And it has been a game changer for me. And, you know, if it reduces some simulation that they're being distracted by, or it points out, oh, I'm being distracted by, you know, the manipulatives on my table. I either need to use them properly or put them away, or whatever. Definitely is a great way to redirect students. And I've done it with all kinds of grade levels. It doesn't, I don't think it expires. I don't think it's only for intermediates or only for primaries. And I know our secondary teachers have done the book study, so I assume that in some cases it's part of their practice as well. My second last, whenever I want students to talk, I circle on their page. So in my problem solving at the consolidation phase of my lessons, students, there's a share and compare component always. But whenever I want students to share, I take a yellow marker and I circle what it is that I want them to talk about. Just doing that is really helpful for students so they don't, well, first I got the orange marker and then I went and I just chose to sit here. I mean, they can talk forever and they get really off on tangents. I give them what I want them to talk about by circling it with the yellow marker in terms of what part of the strategy do I think they should share. And by me doing that, it's my promise to them that what I've circled is correct. So they're not going to share mistakes with the class. There might be mistakes elsewhere on their page, but what I've asked them to talk about, we have this agreement. If I've circled it in yellow, it is right. It's accurate and it's an appropriate strategy, and so then they're willing to talk about it. The second thing I do so that they share without anxiety, because this whole sharing and building the collaborative nature of my classroom is important to me, is whenever they want to share, I give them time to rehearse. They either rehearse with their partner, or some of the students will come and rehearse with me very quickly before they have to rehearse to the whole class. And I know who is more anxious about presenting, especially because it's May, but very quickly I knew, and I would make sure I was close to them so they could rehearse with me. Big, big ways to help reduce their anxiety. And whenever I'm not sure about the wellness of my class, I ask. I use Google Forms all the time with my students, and I ask them very specific math questions on content, and I ask them about their emotions, and I ask them about their goal setting, and I ask what I can do to help. And I just always try and put myself forward as a helper. I'm here to help. What can I do to help? And it's really important for the grade 8s, and I think that they see me as a helper and not the math teacher in the movies with that we talked about earlier that hit the blackboard all the time with the ruler or threw chalk at somebody or things like that. So Google Forms is big in my class. It's a great way for me to take the pulse of my class. And I do ask about goal setting, which is part of well-being. And I ask about anxiety. I ask them what's been difficult for them in math class this week. Is there anything I can do to make it less difficult the next time we come against those topics? Because I do spiral, so it's not every week. But that's it. So if you want to read a little bit more about this, this is the, it's new this year. It's a monograph, and there's the link to it right there. So the ministry, as I said, is paying attention to both of these, the aspects of well-being and math as they combine and overlap. I've read this monograph a few times, so some of the ideas I've shared are in perfect alignment with this, and there are a few other ideas that I haven't talked about in this monograph, so perhaps you're interested in giving that a read. And I am done, so I thought I'd rip through it, but I'm really not done any earlier than I would have been with a larger group. So questions typed in the chat, typed on the slide for anonymity if that's important. Grab the mic and talk. So Michelle, it looks like if there are no questions, I can mute my mic and you can do your thing.
Okay, that sounds good to me. And thanks again for this wonderful session, really, really excellent. I can talk on behalf of everybody to say that you're really lucky to have been privy to your presentation tonight. You're truly a fantastic teacher and a fascinating presenter. It's an absolute joy to listening to you, really. And I find your presentation always really thought-provoking, but more importantly, you always come up with lots of practical and useful strategies, and of course that's the most important, and they're also a lot of fun. I think that the only thing that could have been, just slightly better would have been to see you walking in with your Goldilocks dress or your ice cream vendor suit. That's the only thing I think that could have made it just a touch better. And Amy, Caroline, Margaret, and Megan, thanks so much for being such wonderful participants and for sharing your ideas and your thoughts and your questions with us throughout the session, and for making it look like we had a huge crowd tonight. And actually, it felt like it because you guys were really participating a lot. So I just need an extra couple of minutes to do my usual little spiel. We have some really great sessions in the coming days. Obviously, I just want to point to you on Thursday, May the 3rd, I'll be moderating with Matthew Aldridge, and it's a session on mathematics that might be of interest to you. And Matt Aldridge is a very funny guy, very informal. His sessions are they're very different because he doesn't really prepare, he kinds of improvises, and it's interesting. So I definitely would recommend this one on May the 3rd, and there are plenty more, and I'm just going to paste for you the link to our calendar and invite you to go and visit the calendar on the OTF website and look for yourself for sessions that may be of interest to you guys. I also want to remind you, I know that you know already about this, but there's a $450 subsidy if you have completed an additional qualification course in mathematics, technology, or kindergarten, and I'm going to paste that link as well. If you want to apply for that $450 subsidy, it is still available, so obviously feel free to go ahead. I just want to remind you, as usual, that we need your feedback. At the end, when you are quitting Blackboard, you will be redirected to a feedback questionnaire where you can provide your appreciation or your feelings or whatever about this tonight's session. And then when you're done with the feedback questionnaire, you will be redirected to a second page where you can enter your name and your email address, and then you will receive a certificate of participation that you can add to your learning resume. And that's always nice to have that. And I'm going to quickly post for you in the chat box the link to the feedback survey and to the certificate of participation, just in case you're not being redirected. And I'm also pasting the link to tonight's presentation, and that will be live later tonight. I'll upload everything on that page, the recording, as well as all the resources that Mary-Kay shared with you tonight. So that's it. We are done for this session, and it was a small session, but very sweet, very nice. Thanks, Amy, Caroline, and Megan again for your participation, and Mary-Kay, thanks a lot for this great session once again. So I wish you a good evening and hope to see you soon on OTF Connects again. Merci beaucoup. Bonne soirée à tous.
Thanks, everybody. And Amy, I'm the conference chair, so I'm putting the whole conference together, and I do have a little session. I'm being selfish and taking a session myself too.